Stage 1 for the VCT Pacific League starts this weekend, so it's time to check in on all 12 teams and talk about how they're feeling heading into this stage. How are the fans feeling? Are they panicked? Are they hopeful about the rest of the season? Let's jump into it. So this is the board we have today. I've done this video for 2 other regions as well, for both the Americas and EMEA, so you can check those videos out, but watch this one first. And we have the exact same categories from those videos. At the top we have Chad, so teams that are feeling really good right now, no complaints. Hopium, one step down, so still hopeful for the rest of the season, still feeling good, but not exactly entirely comfortable. Copium, so teams that still have a bit of that hope, but maybe didn't get off to the best start. Panic, obviously feeling worried about the rest of the season. And then at the very bottom, we have the Withered Wojak, so you're down in the dumps, there is no hope left. We will be going in alphabetical order, which means we are starting with one of the Ascension teams, Boom Esports. I feel like Boom is probably about right here in Copium, so they did lose their only 2 matches of kickoff, so I definitely could put them lower, but I feel like in those 2 matches they at least made them a bit competitive, taking a map off of T1 in that opening match, and then also taking a map off of Non-Shim Red Force, the team that they lost against in the grand finals of the Ascension tournament. So while they did lose their only 2 matches, I feel like when it comes to expectations, they were very low for this team, and they have at least shown that they can stay in matches. Whether or not they can win those matches is yet to be seen. At the very least, I think they had a decent showing, so I think there is at least a little bit more than panic there, but they could still end up being the worst team in Pacific, we will see. Moving on, we have DFM, a team that in the previous 2 years, the VCT Pacific League, they've been at the very bottom, only winning I think a total of 2 matches in 2 years, but then they had a pretty good offseason, so there was some hope that they would be a good team this season. And at kickoff, they actually did pretty decent, ending up 5th to 6th, losing to Gen G, but also beating Paper X in a 13-1 map. So I think overall they may have exceeded the expectations of some, and while they still lost against some pretty good teams, I think there is enough there to put them in Hopium right now. This current roster looks leagues better than previous iterations, and I think they've already exceeded some people's expectations. I think most people would have picked Paper X to win that match against them, and then DFM ended up dominating them. So I could put them down in Copium, but I feel like Hopium is a pretty good place to put them. Moving on, we have DRX, one of the 2 attendees of VCT Masters Bangkok from this region, and I think I'm going to put them in the Copium section. So when it comes to DRX, there are 2 different ways to look at it. They did end up winning kickoff, beating T1 in that grand final, so they finally get their first regional trophy in the VCT Pacific, so very impressive work there. They looked like the best team in the region heading into that Bangkok tournament, and then they ended up losing to T1. T1 would, of course, go on to win that tournament, so you could say that it's not a big deal that they lost to them, but that was a match that they had previously been able to win, and then they also lost against Team Vitality, a pretty solid team that made a roster change for some reason, and they ended up winning against Sentinels, so there is a lot of positives that you could take from their performance, especially considering that this team at this point is mostly comprised of rookies or players that haven't been playing Tier 1 for very long. However, I think the reason why I can't put them in Hopium or in Chad is because it doesn't seem to matter the roster that this team has, they always end up in the same spot. A team that can look really good in their own region, make it to international tournaments, look really good at the start of it, and then place 5th to 6th. It is a concerning pattern that this team continues to go through. They don't place 5th to 6th every single international tournament, but they have for the past 3. They don't always place 5th to 6th, but they have for the last 3 that they've attended, I believe. So even with this new exciting roster, with Hyman coming in and looking really good, Freen looking like the best Tejo in the world, they still end up in the same place. It is frustrating to see that this team continues to do the same thing that they have done for years. It's still impressive that they're able to make it to 5th or 6th at internationals. That is an accomplishment in itself, but when you're a roster that wants to be winning trophies, that has to be frustrating. Moving on, we have Gen G, and I think they belong in the same category. So expectations for this team were kind of hard to pin down before the season. They did have a pretty good offseason where they ended up making the grand finals of the Soup League Valorant tournament. They did lose that one to Energy, and the players of last year's roster, the one that went to back-to-back grand finals, winning one of them, were still looking fantastic. Karon, Munchkin, as well as Texture, just looking amazing. However, their new additions in both Foxy9 and Yeoman seem to be struggling, not playing up to the same level as the other players, and that was definitely disappointing for a team that still should be able to make it to internationals. They got close, they got to the lower final, they just lost to T1. So they ended up making a roster change. Yeoman is now off the roster. They brought up Ash, a player that was playing for their academy team, so teams taking advantage of that academy system. You get to see how those players are doing in Tier 2 and you can bring them up if you feel like a roster change is necessary and they're already in your system. So we'll see how this move ends up doing. Foxy9 is rumored to maybe be on his way out as well, but that is nothing confirmed yet. So we'll see if any other moves end up being made, but I think for now we're probably going to see Ash and Foxy9 in as the two new players. So we'll see how Ash does, and I don't mind Gen G making a roster move at this point. It does seem a little bit early, but a ton of teams are making roster moves. So I think you're not panicked if you're a Gen G fan, because they still got top 3 at kickoff, so they still are one of the top teams in their region. They just need to figure out their new additions and how to use them properly. We'll see if this new player in Ash can be the solution that they are looking for. Moving on, we have Global Esports, and I think it's probably back in the panic section for them. So the reason why I'm putting them in panic is it seems like GE is set for another year of mediocrity. They did a full rebuild in the offseason, new coaches, new players, and while they did have some visa issues that were setting them back, it still seems like this team is going to have a similar year to what they had in the previous two. Having players on the roster that could definitely do well, but just not putting together a cohesive unit that gets good results. They started their kickoff with beating Team Secret and then lost to both Talon and DFM, so those are decent teams, but if this team wants to be seen as one of the top 5 teams in their region, they have to do better than that. And definitely some questionable comp decisions here and there from the coaching staff. I don't know. I wasn't super confident in this roster heading into the season, and they didn't show me anything at kickoff that changed my mind. Maybe other fans are more high on them, I don't know, but for now, I'm definitely putting them in the panic section. Moving on, we have Non-Shim Red Force, and I think they're feeling pretty good right now. You could argue Chad, but I think there's probably just going to be one team in the chat area. I think you can guess who it is. But Non-Shim Red Force had a pretty solid kickoff. While there was a lot of hype of this roster heading into this season, there was still an unknown of the fact that they were an Ascension team. They also didn't play any offseason events, so we didn't know how the roster had developed in the offseason, and then they ended up having a pretty solid kickoff overall, being, I think, one of the funnest teams to watch in all of Valorant. Dombey is an hilarious player to watch. That player is just the definition of all aim, no brain. You see him just run in at the most inopportune times and still manage to get a 3 kill. It's absolutely hilarious and wildly entertaining to watch, and the rest of the roster is very solid as well. Persia showing some great ability during kickoff as well, and this team had some pretty good matches despite going out when they did. They started with the win against Zeta. They would go on to face DRX and they would take a map, but they did lose it. Then they beat Boom as well as RRQ and then couldn't win against Talon. One concerning thing that you could maybe point out is the fact that their only win that was a 2-0 victory was against Zeta. All the other matches that they played, it was a 2-1 either victory or loss. So they definitely need to learn how to win 2-0. That would definitely be helpful. It would make for matches to be a bit less tense for the team, but if that's just the kind of team that they're going to be, then they're just going to be even more fun to watch. So we'll see how far this team can end up going. I think the ceiling is quite high for this team. Their playstyle feels like a less refined version of PaperX's style, the W gaming style that's just hyper aggressive, go, go, go. And maybe it works for them better than how it's worked for PaperX in recent memory, which is a segue on to the next team we are talking about, PaperX. For PaperX, it is definitely full-on panic for this team. Not only did they lose in kickoff, they lost their last map 13-1 against DFM, a team that they definitely could have beat. They didn't even take a map off of that team. They did get a win against Zeta. They lost against T1 in their opening match of kickoff, and that was when T1 wasn't playing as good. So that's a match that they could have won, but of course T1 is a very good team. I'm not going to give them too much crap for that. However, the loss against DFM is unexcusable, and it just seems like this team's time as a top team in the VCT Pacific may be coming to an end. And I don't want to sound the alarms too much, because I still think this team can find a way to be really good in their own region. There is a chance that it was just one bad tournament and they're going to come into stage 1 as one of the top teams. Now they have a new player in Patman. Maybe he gets into a game or two. We'll see where that ends up going. But overall, I think my main concern for this team is the fact that it just seems like this team's time as a team that could potentially win an international trophy is far gone at this point. It was slowly going away in 2024. Their best placement internationally was 3rd place at Madrid. But aside from that, it just seems like the Paper X dream is dead at this point. But we'll see where they end up going for the rest of the year. Moving on, we have RRQ, and I think they probably belong in the Copium section. Definitely some good things that we can take from their kickoff performance. Their new player in Cushy looks really solid. But at the end of the day, they still lost 2 out of 3 matches, only beating Team Secret. They lost 2-1 against Gen G, so you took a map off of a pretty good team, that's impressive. And then they lost 2-1 versus Non-Shim Red Force, a team that they probably should have been able to beat. They had a really close second map, 20-22 was the final score, crazy map. But it ends up them losing Pearl 13-8. So they looked like they could potentially be better than previous iterations of the roster, but still aren't getting that result. Maybe their players are playing a bit more on an individual basis instead of a team. That has been a problem for this team in the past, but they still have some really good talent. Estrella might be on his way to Gen G. That was a rumor, but it doesn't seem like it's happening now, so we'll see what happens there. And they're apparently bringing in Crazy Guy, previously of Bleed, and if you know anything about how Bleed went last year, it wasn't great. So we'll see what happens there. Nothing is 100% confirmed, but we'll see. Moving on, we have T1, and yep, there's no other place to put them other than Chad. This team ended up winning the first international tournament of the year, taking home Pacific's 2nd international trophy. A team that at kickoff definitely looked a bit worrisome. They weren't super coordinated, but they still ended up making it to Bangkok. And then they found their stride by playing double duelist comps, which has seemed to have worked swimmingly for them. It was a very close grand final. G2 were 1 kill away from winning it on map 4. I will never forget Valen whiffing on that. That was rough. But even so, T1 was a team that I did expect to be able to win international trophies heading into this year, and I've been proven right pretty quickly. We'll see if they end up kind of going like Sen did last year. Maybe they have a bit of a down period during stage 1, just based off of burnout. But this team should still be in a very good position to win their region, so we'll see what ends up happening there. This team is going to be deadly for the rest of the year. Moving on, we have Talon, another team that recently made roster moves. Ban and Governor out, Kilua and Thai in. So if this team still had the same roster that they ended up running back after the end of last year, I probably would have put them in panic, because while they did get decently far at kickoff, it just seemed like they hadn't really made any upward progression. Now they've made roster changes, which could be a cause for some hope. So I'm going to put them in the Copium section. Getting 4th at kickoff, you realize that wasn't enough. You make these roster changes, and now maybe Primi can be playing Duelist, which is probably a role that he should have been playing in the first place. This team is hoping to crack into the top 3 in their region. They've been sniffing at that door for at least a year now. So maybe these new players ended up pushing them to that spot. I don't know much about these players, so I can't really say. However, if this helps their compositions and puts Primi in a better position to be the superstar player that I think he can be, then this should be a positive change. Or maybe these roster moves end up being a horrible mistake and the team falls apart. We will see. Moving on, we have Team Secret, and yeah, it's the first one of the Doom section, I would say. Not a single win at kickoff. They did win a map in both of their matches, but that was all they could really muster. And this is a team that last year in 2024 fell short in those playoff matches, but at the very least they were able to make it to those playoff matches. But now they're looking like a team that could very well place 12th in the entire region. Not a lot of positives to go off of for this Team Secret roster. They are an organization that does have a decent fan base. However, they just haven't been able to find the success that they used to have before franchising. Maybe they can turn this ship around, but I just think the top end of this Pacific region is just too talented for me to think that that's a possibility, and I think their fans, if they haven't accepted that already, they probably will be seeing it soon. But again, anything can happen in Valorant. Maybe they have an incredible run. Maybe Jesse Vosh just ends up being an absolute monster, but I'm setting my expectations quite low for this team, and I think that's probably where their fan base is as well. Moving on, we have Zeta Division, and I think they belong in the same exact spot as Team Secret. It seems like this is yet another year where Zeta Division is going to be underwhelming. The past 2 years of franchising has not gone well for them. They bring in this new roster from a tier 2 team called Fennel, and they keep some players from last year's roster, and it just doesn't seem to be a combination that is going to be competitive at the tier 1 level. At kickoff, the most amount of rounds that they won in a map was 9. In their match against Non-Shim, they lost Split 9-13, then they lost Haven 9-13, and against Paper X, they lost the first map Lotus 13-5, and and then Fracture 13-8. So this team wasn't even able to break double-digit rounds during the kickoff. So that's a pretty disappointing performance overall. I didn't think the roster was particularly talented heading into kickoff, but more than that. So unless something changes that really convinces people that this team is going to end up being legit, I don't see this team going very far. Right now, it looks like DFM is Japan's only hope for a competitive team in the VCT this year, but again, maybe they turn around, but I'm not expecting it. So these are my VCT Pacific panic rankings for before stage 1. Let me know in the comment section down below, what did you think of this ranking? What do you think of each of these teams? Where are your panic levels for your own team? Let me know all that in the comment section down below. Please click like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. Thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.